nature. Could he stick with it? These things could really use a hand. That had been his mistake before, not trusting Zenobia's feelings for him. But how could he have known, after all these years of silence? Should have died a pirate, he thought. Skyripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway.
How is it part of a weapon at all?
He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Skyripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. He looked up at the old trees around him. They were so big and so old. They'd been there before he was born, and they'd be there after he'd passed into legend. Was he confronting his own unimportance? What had got into him? He was no philosopher. Anyway, who cared? He was plenty important. He was a hero. He was like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. There were fewer and fewer trees. There were only these huge crystalline growths. Had those been here before? He no longer heard birds except for the feverish cawing of the ravens when they attacked. He couldn't smell the small animals of the forest. The mice and rabbits. Where had they gone? And he was getting hungry, too. This was an unhealthy place to be. The 20-sided core made him feel physically sick. Once he had sneaked into a temple of the dark arts, and he hadn't liked what he smelt and saw there. This felt like that. As quick as he could, he wrangled the icosahedron into the armature. He carried his prize back to the Farfarer. Now, he had to make his next move. There was a key Imperial outpost on the Nexus. If this really was some sort of superweapon, he could use it to wreak havoc on the enemy. And if it wasn't, well, better to know that before the final battle. But maybe he should show it to some scientists first. There was an observatory on the Nexus. Maybe he should go there before he fired it. Of course, if you've just assembled a weapon out of legend that can exile gods from the world, you'd want to have a scientist or two look at it. And even if they disagreed and he had time, he could ask Calaveras himself. Yes, the observatory would be his objective. Why had the parts of the Sky Ripper only surfaced now, thousands of years after the Transcendent Emperor had dismantled it? The mad Emperor Isengrim had performed terrible, bloodthirsty rituals to invoke the lost gods. Was that why these ancient artifacts were rising out of the ground? How perfect, then, that the Sky Ripper would reappear to be his destruction. And hopefully this time, just his destruction. Legendary weapon was exactly what the rebellion needed. They were outnumbered. The once kind emperor had become a tyrant. But his ravens stayed loyal, for he fed them his victims, and the other animals were too frightened to rebel. Renato shuddered at what the emperor was trying to do. To bring back the lost gods, the Black Harvest, the Black Sun? No. He would stop that toad, no matter what the risk. Renato was thrilled. The scientists seemed to think he'd put the Sky Ripper together right. But one toad was worried.
Yeah, the Sky Ripper could tear a hole in existence itself. At least go see Calaveras.
Yeah, said the worried toad.
He knows more than anyone else has forgotten about the Transcendent Emperor.
If anyone could tell him how to use this weapon safely, it would be Calaveras. It was he who had told Renato how to find it in the first place. But maybe he had to give up on using it as a weapon. Maybe he had to go to the secret rebel base and ask the generals there what he could do with a weapon that he dared not use. One way or another, there had to be a safe way to use it. On the way to the ruins of the city of Ubar, the truth was, if it wasn't safe, then it was dangerous. They couldn't use it. He'd found the Sky Ripper for nothing. He should have rescued his friend Lupino. Oh, he should have confronted Zenobia. He had nothing but his sword. But maybe the Council would have an idea? Why were so scouring the ruins. Had someone betrayed the secret base? The Sky River to assault the Imperial outpost on the Nexus. He shuddered. That could have gone very wrong. A raven cawed, "There he is!" And they ran away. Coy. They knew he had the core, didn't they? And they were afraid of it. Little did they know, he couldn't use it. Wait, if they didn't know he couldn't use it... Yes. A sword can be powerful without ever being drawn from its scabbard. Once again, Renato was dead right. Or actually just dead. Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. He was on fire. So far, so good. Renato barely made it to the hideout when he was shoved into a meeting room. He laid out his plan. They were shocked. Bluff the Emperor with an unusable weapon?
Yeah, it's brilliant, laughed Renato. He keeps sending ravens, none of them come back. How does he know it's my sword?
I suppose there's no harm if it fails. Take the Sky Ripper into a firing position,
Croaked the speaker.
I shall attempt to hail him by far, Speaker.
It was a huge bluff. Renato had no cards to play. Just a weapon that could maybe destroy everything he hated and everything he loved. Could he be sure it wouldn't work? No, of course not. Of course the Emperor couldn't be sure it wouldn't work, and he must believe in ancient weapons if he hoped to bring back the lost gods, right? What terms could he offer Isengrim III? He would have to step down, obviously. And accept the rebellion? Maybe Renato would ask him to make Zenobia Empress. Yeah, his daughter, after all. She would never sacrifice innocent kittens and puppies to bring back the lost gods. No. Renato had to seem confident. Overconfident, even. Like he was sure he could blow up the Emperor's ship to hell. I mean, who believes a cautious breath? fighting to place a weapon he could not use. He could end the war tonight with just a threat. So much more than destroying a ship or an entire fleet. And then he would destroy the Sky Ripper in case some other adventurer was tempted. You never knew about some of these other foxes. Soon, it would all be over. Pumping like a bit of killing. He set up the Sky Ripper and let it warm up. Zenobia came out, flanked by a whole platoon of ravens. "I know you, Reynardo. You won't actually use that," she said. "I know what the scientists told you, that it would totally blow up your fleet. You're reckless, Reynardo. Bold, dashing, brave, devil-may-care, wild, impulsive, hasty, rash, sometimes even a little harebrained, a bit feckless even. You just don't think things through. Oh, get to the point, woman. But you're not crazy. How do you know I didn't go crazy?" demanded Reynardo, doing his very best to look crazy. "Well, go ahead then. Press the trigger." Oh, damn her. She'd seen through him again. She never fell for his bluffs. This was the moment to do something brilliant, to come up with exactly the right thing to say, to make a heroic move. That's what heroes do. Oh, but he couldn't think of anything that wasn't obviously stupid. He was too shocked to move. Her ravens came and seized the Sky Ripper. He stared as they pushed it over the side into the abyss. "Hey! Oh, I fought really hard to get that. It should never have come back." And he had to admit she was right. She had always been right. It was one of the frustrating things about her. Years later, as he rotted to his death in an Imperial prison cell, Reynardo was still trying to come up with something clever and heroic that he could have done in that last moment. But he never could. Oh, again? He already had all the secrets he needed. He was sure of that. He must have not used them the right way. What was the best, worst mistake he could make? Probably trusting that traitor Lapino. The book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again. Faster than before? And he fell. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Reynardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis Stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. The Transcendent Emperor had buried its pieces deep. And then, this Emperor's horrific sacrifice. As he set foot on the island, Renato couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lapino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Renato felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper? The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He had to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it? Renato hated gogglers, but it freaked him out to cut them. The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the Lost Gods, thousands of thousands had died. But Renato had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one. There were still so many games to play, Renato thought as he died. Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway. The device was intricate. No, how was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. Renato asked himself why he changed course to confront Zenobia. The truth is, though, he wanted to see her, wasn't it? It had been a dozen years since Swordfu School. He'd followed every rumor about her, every scrap of news. Not that he still loved her. After all, she was his enemy. No, it was solely because, know your enemy. All right, maybe he should stop pretending. He knew exactly how she felt about him. But their love affair always ended with a tragic death. Unless, maybe he could find a way to dodge tragedy. Surely he could, couldn't he? Worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, did he? Didn't your mother tell you it's rude to stare? Snapped Renato, a little smug. How he was going to capture Zenobia. She'd be expecting him. And he didn't have Lapino to cook up a clever plan. Why was it again that he hadn't got the core? Maybe because the results tended to be disastrous. These streets were familiar. He saw through streets of closed. But he had been down that street 1,000 times. He knew that pub. He knew that alley. He knew the alley behind it much too well. No wonder Zenobia had chosen to invade this island herself. Renato slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. Where were her guards? Finally, he reached her bedroom.
That makes no sense. It's a trap,
Shouted the Emperor.
I'll meet you at the outpost, and I'll bring my interrogators.
If Renato came face to face with the Emperor, maybe he could assassinate him. But maybe it would be smarter and safer to turn Zenobia against her father. What kind of proof could you...
caught up with him. Don't...
learned enough secret from Renato to crush the rebellion. It will be a fair trade if the scientists could convince Zenobia to change side. Energy cannons, the last argument of kings.
The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The Ravens had burned the reanimated witness to sin. I don't know. Let's go to the fleet and ask him.
Yes. I'll meet you on the mountains. There's something I have to get first.
But could he afford to meet her in the mountains? He'd given the Empire the location of the secret rebel base. They would need rescuing. Renato was torn. He...
So he had given the Sky Ripper's core to the Empire. He felt stupid about that.
He hoped the Emperor didn't bring the Sky Ripper against the base. There was nothing he could do to fight a legendary weapon. Renato hated when he screwed up. One of these days, he would learn to live before he pounced. But today is not that day. He fell for his own amusement.
Decided not to tell the Council he'd given the Empire Sky Ripper's core and the location of the secret base. They needed him in battle, not afraid. Right? The Raven was slumped in a pile of its own feathers, like a tree in November.
You can't stop us. The Emperor has a weapon no warrior can defend against.
What happened to you? Renato asked. But the Raven chose that moment to go to the great nest in the sky.
So they'd made the core into a weapon. Well, that wasn't good.
I can't be dying, he thought. I'm the hero. Should really look for another line of work, he thought. And then he died. Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. He was on fire. So far, so good. Renato had never slain so many ravens. The secret base was going to stink of burnt feathers for months. The council speaker was confused.
Our spies say Zenobia has gone berserk. She attacked and destroyed an entire squadron of dropships.
This was amazing good news. He'd shown her the Emperor's evil. Now she'd gone over to the rebel side. Now is our moment. Attack! Renato exulted. They could win this thing. Zenobia commanded half the fleet. Who would follow the mad Emperor when they could follow his heir, who was wise and smart and a brilliant sorceress besides? But what about the core and the Iblis stone? What evil could the Emperor wreak with those? As he closed in on the Imperial fleet, Renato liked his odds. Oh, how had he gotten into this mess? He'd never set out to be a hero. When he was a kid, he wanted to be a great cat burglar, until his mother had exploded. The port was heavily guarded. Still something he didn't want it to go. There were raven bodies everywhere. The precision of the wounds. Ada recognized her style. It appeared that she was single-handedly turning the tides of the battle. Good. That left the Emperor with only the core. Against him, all the rebels, his daughter, and the ravens. He wished he was fighting alongside her, but they'd meet up soon enough. Soon he'd confront the Emperor. Again. This time, he'd make an end of him. He'd screwed up last time, but he had a good feeling about this time. Zenobia was cutting down the Emperor's bodyguard like they were mushrooms. The Emperor was frantically readying some arcane instrument, brass and hammered steel wrapped around a glowing, thrumming sphere. Skyripper's core. Zenobia! Bernardo shouted. But he had no idea what else to say. Revenge! She shouted as she cut the last bodyguard down. A ray lanced out of the sphere. Everything around her burst into flames, but her sword seemed only to absorb it. She walked towards Isengrim III like she was walking against a river. Nothing could stop her. They were going to win. Zenobia stabbed the Emperor dead and flicked the moaning apparatus off. She was laughing hysterically. Or weeping, maybe. They had won. He ran to her. I killed my own father. She wept, and he held her. He told her he loved her. He would pull her back from the brink of madness. But the core thrummed louder and louder. At that moment, Bernardo understood that the core was going to explode catastrophically. And that this could have been victory. The Emperor and his daughter dead, the fleet destroyed. He'd almost been a hero. A legendary one, maybe. If only he and the rebel fleet hadn't been here. Oh, again? He already had all the secrets he needed. He was sure of that. He must have not used them the right way. What was the best, worst mistake he could make? Probably trusting that traitor Lapino. The book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again. Faster than before? And he fell. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Skyripper had surfaced. Bernardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Bernardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage.
Renato finally realized that Lapino was a traitor to the cause. And maybe Renato could use that somehow. Renato couldn't quite put his paw on when he'd realized Lapino was working for the Empire. He'd never exactly seen Lapino sending coded messages to the palace, but he was sure. The rabbit had been on too many disastrous missions where he was the only survivor, or where he accidentally missed getting on the boat that went down to the abyss in flames. If Renato could prevent Lapino from getting back to the fleet with all the intelligence he'd probably gathered, it might be worth the trip. How had they come to this? They'd been on so many adventures together. Lapino had talked Renato out of prison at least 4 times, and Renato had rescued Lapino from at least 2 lynch mobs. That the rabbit resented him. Lapino was hilarious because he was so down on himself and everyone else. But behind the laughs, he wasn't a happy camper. Was this payback? Or did the Empire have his little white tail in a vice? Let's make this quick. I'm on my break in the Ravens were landing everywhere from dropships. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lapino first, the rabbit would give the Empire all the intelligence he'd been stealing from the rebellion, and they'd probably give him a medal. He'd have to be very careful about how he played Lapino. At the slightest hint of danger, the mad rabbit would take off. Would betray him. The core was dangerous. Renato had a fleeting idea that the 2 ideas went together somehow. And then it was gone again. Damn ideas. They never stuck around when you needed them. Bloody and exhausted, Renato finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing shuffling his favorite deck. Now that he knew what the rabbit was, there were a few things about him that Renato didn't find so amusing anymore. You sent me an urgent message saying that you're in danger. Oh, I am. The Ravens are coming. Now, I got a clever plan to kidnap Zenobia. Renato wanted to clap shackles on the rabbit and shout, "You're a traitor, and I'm not falling for it." But if there was one thing Renato was sure of, it was that the core of the Sky Ripper was dangerous mostly to its user. If he could put it in the Emperor's hands, old Isengrim III might blow himself and his fleet up with it. Yes, that was it. Me? A traitor? I'm hurt, said Lapino. Why ever would you say that? We found your code book, said Renato. They hadn't, but he hoped Lapino would blow his cover. You got me, said Lapino. And you know what? I don't regret a thing. It's always about you, isn't it? You're the pretty hero. You get the girl, you get the medal, and what do I get? Rabbit food. I thought you liked rabbit food. Go to hell, said Lapino, and he made a gesture. and 20 ravens came out of nowhere and stabbed Renato to death. He had tried something bold and paid the price for it. How had they come to this? They'd been on so many adventures together. Lapino had talked Renato out of prison at least 4 times, and Renato had rescued Lapino from at least 2 lynch mobs. Resented him. Lapino was hilarious because he was so down on himself and everyone else. But behind the laughs, he wasn't a happy camper. Was this payback? Or did the Empire have his little white tail in a vice? Landing everywhere from dropships. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lapino first, the rabbit would give the Empire all the intelligence he'd been stealing from the rebellion, and they'd probably give him a medal. He'd have to be very careful about how he played it. At the slightest hint of danger, the mad rabbit would be off. Bloody and exhausted, Renato finally reached Lapino. The rabbit was practicing shuffling his favorite deck.
Oh, I am. The ravens are coming. Now, I got a clever plan to kidnap Zenobia.
Renato wanted to clap shackles on the rabbit and shout, "You're a traitor, and I'm not falling for it." But if there was one thing Renato was sure of, it was that the core of the Sky Ripper was dangerous mostly to its user. If he could put it in the Emperor's hands, old Isengrim III might blow himself and his fleet up with it. Yes, that was it. Renato felt like a real hero, brave and smart. He told the rabbit all about the Sky Ripper's God's Eye core. "I'll go get the core while you attack Zenobia," he told the rabbit. "But wait, I've an even better idea." Right. Now, all Renato had to do was fight his way through Zenobia's invading troops, sneak onto her ship and into her bedroom, and kidnap her without any of her dozens of guards alerting her. Then, he would rely on her love for him to convince her how evil her father was, so she'd run away with him instead of going back to her father, who was going to blow himself up. It did sound a little risky. But Renato had a feeling it would work out somehow. It always did.